everyone. Welcome to Infrastructure Matters, episode 68. And I have got all of my buddies here again. We've coming in from Chicago. Is it any cold up there, Mr. Keith?
Oh, it's got to be cold up there.
You know what? We are. I think yesterday we got up to a balmy 22 degrees, so we're free. Yeah. We broke zero for the first time in a while, so I'm fine.
And Dion, and you're in Washington, D.C. Isn't it warming up? Or did you guys, you missed the snow?
We got the polar vortex. We were 2 degrees yesterday. So, yeah, it was cold.
Sweet. Sweet. All right, guys, we've got quite a week this week. And there's a lot of things that are going on, especially on the government, politics, all that stuff, or whatever you want to call that stuff. But we're going to bring it back to kind of what this really means to our Infrastructure Matters cool guys that listen into us, because, this is like, I learned so much from this podcast. I don't know about you guys, but I do. So what we're going to kick off with here is kind of the big stuff that started happening this week that Diane has been doing a lot of work with, and that is the CEO Insights work that our Futurum has been doing along with Kearney, that got released at Davos to great fanfare. And I guess you've been doing the roll around on all kinds of news, and I saw our numbers all over the place. So very congratulations on some great work. So why don't you head in and tell us what this is all about and what the CEO should be thinking about and the CIO should be thinking about in Infrastructure Matters.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Camberley. So we released a major new report. It's titled, "Are CEOs Ready to Seize AI's Potential?" And so we sought to actually answer that question. And so it's very interesting. We surveyed over 200 top CEOs. We interviewed over 20 of them as well to really get the color about what are they doing. And AI is top of mind for the CEO. They see it as a major competitive issue. It can dramatically cut costs on one side, and it can also create breakout products and services for their customers on the other side. So they both want to innovate and they want to cut costs. Broadly, we saw that they expect their businesses to be highly automated in 3 years. I talked to the CEO of one major audit company, and he thinks the audit function is going to be replaced completely. That's not going to be their core business going forward. They're still going to sell that as the first thing they do, but then once the AI has all that data, then they can be advisors and they can go up the stack, as we say, and do more strategic work, consulting and helping them guide their business. That's the kind of AI transformation that we're seeing. And so we saw that 59% of CEOs directly lead their organization's AI strategy. And we also found out that that's not necessarily a good thing. They should, the CEOs that step back after they set the mandate, say, we need to rethink our business in terms of AI. And then they step back, they had a higher success rate, a higher reported success rate.
And why is that? Did you just
They may not have the expertise to really figure out where the best place to apply AI is. So they're not the subject matter experts, even of parts of their business, never mind the AI piece. And so the ones that got overly involved in that reported less success. So that was one of the kind of big insights, that CEOs absolutely have the biggest voice and they can make it happen, but they shouldn't go along and keep their hands on it too long. They constrain success.
That's the total micromanagement stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Diane, both of us cover, the SAPs and Oracles of the world. And we see this not just in AI. We've seen this historically when it comes to implementing these company-wide initiatives such as ERP, that the success is not driven by the CEO, at least not managing the project, but typically by them sponsoring the project and giving that inferred power of change. And that's probably the most indicative. Did you find any corollaries from kind of traditional enterprise IT projects, which I don't know if I would call AI enterprise IT project?
No, that's why we took the CEO view. Normally we look at the CIO, what they're doing, but we're seeing that the CEO is the one that's having to really drive that massive change across their organization, and they have the ear of the board the CIO often doesn't have. And yes, this is coming in from a different angle than we often see it coming from, and it's this enterprise-wide transformation. It's broadly happening. There's very few CEOs we talk to that aren't planning to do something immediately or already doing something big immediately. So that was interesting. And like you'd expect, the biggest area where we're seeing AI being rolled out right now is in customer experience, some aspect of it. And it's a lot around customer support and customer service right now. But increasingly, it's going into marketing, sales, R&D. There was a lot of CEOs that are planning to formulate product. They want AI to formulate breakthrough products for them. They don't think it's ready yet, but as soon as it is, they're going to pounce on that. So it's fascinating. And we go to futurumgroup.com. Go to the AI report portal and get yourself a copy.
Well, make sure
I actually have it up now. It's been up on my desktop for the past since it was released. And I've just been, you told me that the latter part, once you get past, this is an Infrastructure Matters podcast. So if you do get access to the report, take Dion's advice that he gave to me, get past the few pages of fluff that us infrastructure folks don't care about, quite frankly, and get to the latter parts. There's great graphs, data points that infrastructure geeks will appreciate.
And it's super reflective of what just happened this last week, which is the two different things. And we're going to talk about that. One is the Stargate announcement and what that's all about. And the other thing is this continuing, discussion or announcements around building more data centers. And it's like the latest one that I saw was Facebook talking about dropping in like 58 billion or something like that into whatever the big number was into, or maybe it was 60 something, into data centers. And this is like all this money getting dropped into this. It's just enormous. It's kind of head spinning, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the infrastructure, a large percentage of infrastructure in the future is going to be out there in the cloud in these massive spends. So Satya Nadella said that he's spending 80 billion this year alone, just in 2025 on infrastructure. You just talked about Zuckerberg's announcement. And of course, we have Project Stargate, which we're about to talk about. And then we heard OpenAI stole Meta's head of infrastructure and storage. I don't know if you guys heard about that. So now they're competing amongst themselves for people who are capable of building out these multi-million GPU compute cluster, right? So they train these models. It's fascinating.
Yeah, the battle for talent is not going to end. And I just harking back a little bit to the CEO report, you talked about in the report the skills gap, and I think this is an indication specifically in our industry where you're going to see competition for people who know how to not just implement the infrastructure and the technology, but actually put it to work. And it's going to be a fascinating.
I think there's a difference between building a data center that can run a lot of different workloads to building a cluster, a mega cluster that can train up a frontier model that has national and international competitive implications, right? So it's it's a different level.
So it sounds like they're going to start picking out of Lawrence Livermore, JPL, Fermilab, a few others around the world that they'll probably be picking some people out of because as well as the guys from the public cloud major cloud providers. So I would think that that's kind of where the skills base is going to be coming from.
Yeah, and as we get into the big announcement, the kind of these resource restraints, just not around hardware, this talent resource restraint, and the other resource restraint is data. And part of the big announcement was Oracle. We'll get into that in detail, but where's the data is going to come from? We've already, I think Elon Musk has been quoted as saying we've basically already scraped all of the data on the internet for these models. Where's the rest of the data going to come from to make better AI? And that is, I think, a bigger challenge than, I think that's going to become a bigger challenge than the compute challenge.
It is, although the numbers are supposedly that only about 2 or 3% of enterprise data has been sucked into these models yet. And so, I work with a lot of different professional associations and their CIOs. So like the American Geophysical Union, they've got an enormous amount of information, which is all behind their 100 years of research and research papers that are not publicly available. That, of course, you'd want that scientific knowledge in your foundation model if you can get it. But the Geophysical Union is not going to just give that up. And so there's a lot of deals now that have to be made to unlock all the rest of the data that's behind these organizational boundaries. So,
and I think this is part of the macro discussion around AI and AI models and the haves and have-nots. You'll have the haves who can afford to build the compute to generate models
and buy the data. They have both build the compute and buy all the data that their competitors don't have yet.
And then you'll have the have-nots that cannot access the data. So I think we're going to see new service models come up. People are going to want to sell that capability. Anthropic and OpenAI won't be able to go to these private organizations and get their data because they, it is the keys to their kingdom. I've talked to Fortune 50 companies who just simply said they will not use public cloud services for AI because the vast majority of their crown jewel data is within their four walls. And there's no way they're going to allow that data to be used for training for public models.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we want to skip over to Stargate and talk about what that's all about?
I think that's the biggest news of the week. Yeah, who wants to do that one?
So Diane, you wrote a whole research note on it. So I think you are the resident expert on all things Stargate as far as it goes.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. So the big reveal in AI this week was the announcement of Project Stargate. It's a consortium of the top companies, or some of the top companies in AI, and that's the rub. It's a bunch of companies that have come together. It includes OpenAI, obviously, kind of at the top. They're the apex company, and the one I think will most stand to benefit from all this. Microsoft and Oracle, which, from an enterprise standpoint, we're very interested in their involvement. And we also have on a hardware level, we have NVIDIA and AMD from the hardware infrastructure piece. And they have, with SoftBank, that's the Japanese venture capital firm, have come up with a $500 billion fund to create next generation AI frontier models and to assure American competitiveness and leadership in AI for the foreseeable future is the stated goal of Project Stargate. And there's a lot of debate about whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. They're already starting on the first 10 data centers that are primarily going to be located down in Texas. And the intent is to build models at a level that no one else can. And by building, training capabilities and that can train and create all the deeper linkages between knowledge that a regular model can't do like in a year. Like it takes some of these models nearly a year to train on all their data, and so they can only go to a certain depth. If you have much more power, you should be able to squeeze more out of your data. Now, there's a big debate about whether you can do that or not. If a larger parameter model that goes deeper actually creates better data, they believe that they can. So that's Project Stargate you got a tremendous amount of attention. I've never had so many media inquiries about a piece of news. And in a regular climate, this might be viewed as creating a monopoly power, big vendors colluding and keeping the other ones out. So like Meta is not inside the consortium. Neither is Anthropic. These are arguably leaders in AI that are now because they're not part of this. And Musk has Grok as well, and he was very, very upset. Had very negative things to say about the whole project. And so it's very controversial in some circles, yet it stands to benefit United States and keep us in leadership because that's the gap is closer than we thought. We also learned something else, which we'll get to in terms of there's now international competition in AI.
So when we think about what Stargate is going to be creating here, it sounds like it's a government initiative, but it's not because it's private money.
It's supported by the government.
This was all done by, great fanfare with Mr. Trump up there with these guys and saying we're doing all this $500 billion whatever. So they're creating this foundation model that will be used by the general public, the general company, all the companies that can license into it.
I know how many models they'll create, who owns them, and how the profits will be shared. I think those are things that are up in the air right now. We don't know, and often, because there's competing company. Microsoft and Oracle are competitors. That factor often makes these types of consortiums come apart or underperform. So they don't want to mix their stuff up with their competitors, so they won't share their best information or best people or best knowledge or whatever it is. That's very interesting.
Which has me asking the question, who has the most data? Who hosts the most data for customers, Microsoft or Oracle? It goes back to how these frontier models will be trained. Where is the additional data coming from? Again, the internet is big, but not that big when it comes to how much private data that exists on tape, how much private data that it exists in real-time ERP systems. How will enterprise customers benefit from Stargate? And will there be a monopoly in a sense that they don't want to go down the route of VMware vis-a-vis Broadcom and be stuck and obligated to having their most critical business functions held by a monopoly of vendors? It is fascinating times, and the implications are very deep. We're in a very unknown state of affairs and water.
But the Oracle data, all that ERP data, the customer data, all those items, whether or not you're talking about our data or the company's data that's up in Salesforce, company's data that's up in some ERP system, that is not owned by Oracle, Microsoft, either of them.
But there's going to be a tremendous interest in figuring out how to incentivize the owners of that data to share it, even anonymously. And so that's the big debate. And of course, there'll be temptation to use it, to use data shadows or digital exhaust as much as possible. I think that what we may see is maybe they need some of the massive compute to be able to create private models to say, look, we can go and train on all your data with our data, but you're going to have it in an entirely isolated cluster.
So Dion, what do you mean by digital exhaust? What do you mean by digital exhaust? That's a term that we haven't used here. So if you can explain that.
So all people and all companies have what are called digital exhaust. They give off, during their daily activities, they have log files and notifications and messages and information flows. All that's collectively that comes out of a person or organization's activities is called digital exhaust. And it's actually very valuable because the more current a piece of information is, the more relevant it tends to be. And so digital exhaust is the most current information about what a person or what an organization is doing in the digital world. And it's everything that comes out of that, all the events and that take place generate that digital exhaust. A lot of it's not visible, but a lot of it actually is visible. You can script the public stuff. The question is, how do you get the private, digital exhaust?
Okay, cool. All right. So related to this topic is this DeepSeek frontier model from China that we're hearing about. And frankly, it's part of I think one of the reasons why we do have Stargate is because our concern is China is advancing faster than we are and getting way out there in front because they don't have any of these privacy issues that we have here. As we well talked about with the TikTok crud. But so let's talk about the DeepSeek frontier model from China. Who wants to take that?
Well, I'll just do a brief, overview of it, and then you guys dive in. But yeah, this was a shot across the bow in that we've not seen internationally very many highly capable models. There's been some, but they haven't really been exposed to the benchmarks and proven themselves. You have to be able to be considered a capable model, you have to pass the standard benchmarks at a high level. Generative AI research is very advanced. So there's very sophisticated benchmarks and leaderboards now that measure all the different dimensions of a model and scores it. And you can go to these leaderboards and see how they're doing. And China hasn't been there until this week. DeepSeek arrives and it goes near the top of the leaderboard. It's competing with OpenAI's best models at a benchmark level across all the dimensions. This is a big surprise because as much as they don't have the privacy concerns, China also doesn't really want to create models that have all the information. They don't want their people to have all the information. And so it makes it difficult for them to pass the benchmarks when they have to censor large parts of their models because they don't want to generate that information. Well, this model, they've either figured out how to get around that or they don't care anymore. We don't know what it's brand new, so we're still kicking the tires. But DeepSeek has put the American AI industry on notice that China is here, has closed the gap. I don't think it was the reason why Project Stargate was announced, but it's taken the edge off the announcement by showing that there is a threat and it's coming, right? So that's where we are.
So from a use of the DeepSeek frontier model, is this strictly going to be a Chinese model that only China will be using that model, or are some of the other countries going to be renting it, much like we are doing with OpenAI and those kind of things, be able to grab onto that model and do training with it?
I think it's because it has to pass open benchmarks. I think it's generally available. We haven't seen how accessible enterprises can actually license it, or if it's just used for researcher use. But that's often when a model first comes out, it's only usable by researchers, but we'll find out.
We're going to see.
I think it highlights that this is not a black and white issue of U.S. regulations bad, Chinese unfiltered regulations good. It's complicated, right? The Chinese have their geopolitical concerns. They have their own privacy concerns on what Chinese citizens are allowed to view. So that, in a sense, handicaps their ability to create models. It is exceptionally difficult, more so than I understand, to control what comes out of a model.
Right.
We've seen the likes of Google, Microsoft, OpenAI fail at doing what we call responsible AI. And I'm sure the Chinese government, with their constraints, have much bigger challenges on how they, we have this, you call it the digital exhaust challenge. I haven't really coined the term for it, but you have this law of unintended consequences when it comes to models. You create a whole new data source that you didn't count on. So what happens when you feed all your organization's data into a model that the users have rights to, from an access control? They have rights to the individual data points, but they don't have rights necessarily to the derivative. So when the model can now give them insights that they probably shouldn't have, how do you control access to that data and those insights? So a big, big concern for enterprise is the lessons we'll see from these geopolitical fights.
Well, some of that, how you control some of that insight piece of it is also having to do with your data management and how you're allowing people to get access to that data management, which is now finally bubbling up and saying, okay, so this is a big thing. This is a big thing in terms of how we're managing it, how we're either masking the data, allowing people to access that data, use that data to train, their models that they have internally. So,
yeah, Dion, maybe me and you can do a deeper dive on what happens when the digital exhaust gets in the wrong hands. Like that can be, if I'm an administrator, I have access to the digital exhaust, and now I feed that to even if it's an in-house model, if I feed that to an on-prem model, what insights can I get about the organization that I probably shouldn't have is really.
What do you start doing?
I would like to do that. Well, this way, filtration and AI safety is going to be so key, and it's becoming really important to make sure models don't emit sort of things that they know, because if you can't just use a scaffold and remove information from a model. It's deeply trained in. It's not something that you can go and delete. So you have to filter it. And how that's done is getting better, but it's still an art form.
Yeah. So before we're getting close to the half hour. I know, Keith, we were putting on the spot this time. We have a bunch of other stuff we want to cover, but I don't think we're going to have time for it. And Keith, we wanted you to give your predictions since we both have had our time in the spotlight, but it's all yours.
Yeah. So predictions and kind of reflection on the year. This was supposed to be the year that Broadcom lost 30% of their VMware customers. It did not happen. Camberley, both me and you were at a backup vendors analyst session. They have pretty good purview over the VMware landscape, and I think they saw maybe a total reduction of maybe 3% of 3 to 5% of VMware workloads being backed up. So Broadcom has won, at least in the short term.
Well, it's a proof point of how hard it is to get off of your cloud supplier if you've wired it deeply into your infrastructure for 15 years.
Exactly.
Well, one of the things I had said that if we didn't have this AI craze that's going on, which is an absolute change in the company and their orchestration, et cetera, you might have taken the time to do a conversion.
You might have.
Since you have AI, you can't afford to put skills on this.
And I think you're hitting you're the setup woman for my first prediction, which is the relationship between AI and enterprise IT is going to be complicated. The AI is not a IT initiative. It is, as Dion's research has proven out, it is a board level initiative that IT will play a critical role in. And there is a obvious skills gap. There is also this tension between where do I put my smart people? I'm going to need my smartest, most talented folks from not just a technology perspective, but from a political and leadership perspective in IT to lead some of this AI-driven change. Where are the budgets going to come from? Companies are very frustrated with the licensing models from the likes of Microsoft or the AI agents at $35 a pop. This is a productivity tool that the burden is falling on IT to find out where they're going to get that additional $35 per user. I'm not revealing, I don't think, any trade secrets. Microsoft isn't discounting their Microsoft Office 365 agent. I mean, not even the agents, just the 065 stuff. So where are budgets going to land? It's going to be a very difficult transition for enterprises to figure out where the budget for AI comes from. That's going to be interesting.
So this sounds like Microsoft has taken a page out of Hochstein's book and said, I've got him over a barrel here. So screw you. Sorry.
Yeah. As part of our CIO, CTO forums, both me and Dion have talked to CTOs who have said, we're not buying it. Like the options are from Salesforce to SAP to all of these companies, incumbents embedding AI into their base solutions. The question is, where is the value? Claude has a very different value prop than a Microsoft Office, and most CIOs and CTOs are taking a measured look. My son's organization that he works for has, given all of their organization access to Microsoft Office 365, and his reaction was, you know what, he'd rather have the $35 a month to go out and get his own AI tools or do whatever he would want to increase his productivity. So that's kind of prediction one. Prediction two is, we're going to see more movement in private cloud. Part of this is driven by AI. The other part is driven by public cloud has just gotten old. It's matured, and enterprises have built applications in the public cloud 10, 15 years ago that they no longer touch. And we could easily run these always on or sometime on applications on private infrastructure. And we're going to see private cloud take a bigger chunk out of maybe not the innovation that happens in the public cloud, but we are going to see the optimization of cost happen when it comes to some of these older public cloud workloads. Does this mean that VMware Cloud Foundation wins? I don't think so. It is complicated, and this is stuff that enterprises can do simply with Kubernetes. So those are pretty much my big focuses on.
And my CIO survey data backs you up, Keith. 71% at all-time high watermark by far of CIOs say they'll reconsider where they run workloads this year.
Yeah, I saw that data point, and I could not have shaken my head more vigorously. Yes, it's what I've heard, it's what I've seen, and it's the short term and the long term.
But at the same time, your other piece of data says they're going to continue to invest in the public cloud.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So there's within
That's
that
where innovation.
It's just
both of those tensions going on. Yeah.
Yeah, public cloud's not going away at all. It's still going to keep growing, of course. It's just that there's now a new mix in the equation.
With the $500 billion here, 65.
I know I can't get a billion. It's $500 billion. That's the biggest spend in infrastructure we've ever seen in the history of our industry.
Yeah, and what I love about this is that we're seeing this go into maybe the inner parts of our country. Right, the middle parts of our country. So that expansion, we'll see the immigration from California and the coast into the middle of the country change things. Okay,
somebody built a data center in Tennessee. Who knows?
I think there already are some, and with TVA and all their water.
That's right.
Their water power there is going to be great. All right, guys, it has been a full 30 minutes that we have been chatting. And you know what? We have not even mentioned the word cybersecurity this time. Can you believe it?
Wow.
So thank you so very much for joining us. And we will see you next week.